Hello and welcome to episode number 3 of Beyond Cost. Today we will talk about why Germany might need an economic pivot. Together with Andreas Cornet. Andreas spent the last 30 years shaping how leaders think, and now he's pushing this further with his initiatives, which we will come to. Andreas, welcome to the Beyond Cost podcast.
Thanks a lot.
Great to have you. Before we go into a pivot for Germany, which is an agenda that you shaped with others, maybe a bit about you. You're in the industry for a very long time. You were at McKinsey over 30 years. So maybe you just quickly introduce yourself to our audience for people who are not familiar with your person yet.
Yes, thanks a lot. And very happy to be here with you in actually sunny Vienna. Yeah, very happy to introduce myself. Yes, my name is Andreas Cornet. I'm actually 58 years old. I spent, as you mentioned, 30 years and 1 month with McKinsey, almost exclusively doing things in the automotive industry and around the automotive industry. I'm a mechanical engineer by training, and I would say I never stopped being an engineer, which sounds a bit maybe strange for other people, imagining that I was working in management consulting. I also obtained a doctorate degree in business without studying business, but in some universities that's possible. And yeah, actually by roots, I'm very European. So my mother's German, my father's Dutch, and as you can tell from my last name, my ancestors were French. That really helps to think European, which I try to do. Before McKinsey, actually, I founded a software company while still being a student, but I stopped that when I joined McKinsey. And as I mentioned, at McKinsey, I worked a lot in automotive. What I liked very much is I never really lost contact to technological questions. And that's what I loved most, like the interface between technology, but also management. And personally, I'm married for 25 years already, and I have a daughter, and she's 22. So that's about myself.
Oh, thank you for the introduction. Interesting. One could say you're originally a techie. You studied mechanical engineering. You were driven to the business side in terms of management consulting. Was this something that you discovered along the way while you were studying? Or was it something that you came later to, that this interface is especially interesting for you as a person?
Yeah. It's very funny because it was actually a workshop when I was a student in Aachen, Technical University Aachen, with Roland Berger. And it was a workshop about basically how engineers could work in management consulting. And I was so fascinated by that workshop that I said, okay, this is what I want to do. And to be very open, before that, I hardly knew what management consulting at McKinsey, Roland Berger, BCG, or Bain was about. And then basically a couple of months later, when I finished my studies, I applied at a couple of management consulting companies and ended up with McKinsey. So that's basically how I got there. So it was Roland Berger bringing me to McKinsey, which is a bit strange.
That's an interesting one. Yeah. And do you see, because nowadays a lot of students, be it from the technical field or from the management field, see McKinsey as a great career stepping stone. Was it back then when you started 30 years ago too? Or was it there way more, let's say, a niche thing for technology of being mechanical engineer to do?
Yeah. McKinsey, even back then, which is 30 years ago, had a wide variety of qualifications. And I remember very well that even one of our most experienced steel experts by training was a farmer. Yeah? And we had also people from theology and so on. And nevertheless, back then it was still that if I remember right, 45% of all employees had a background in business administration. And out of the top of my head, that has changed. So the variety is larger, and the share of like mint people working at McKinsey has also increased.
Yeah, very interesting. And generally among younger people, management consulting is something that you do for a couple of years and then you move on.
Yes.
You followed through for 30 years. How has that shaped your mindset? What do you say that, not per se McKinsey, but this activity of management consulting, what is the traits in terms of how you approach problems that you say, yes, this that really got imprinted on me?
Yeah, I think I cannot imagine that someone is in management consulting for 30 years without having the idea of doing something else every now and then. It would be a strange mind if this does not come to your mind, and even every now and then you also get offers from your client. For me, it was, and maybe I had such a moment, I don't know, 2 or 3 or 4 times. For me, it was always that when I was struggling with this thought, there was something coming around the corner, which was just so exciting that I forgot about the idea and said, oh no, this is really a fascinating project, a fascinating challenge. I want to do that. And then you are 3 months older and the thought is gone. Yeah, this is the one thing which kept me, is the enormous variety of really fascinating and challenging problems to solve, and the ability and the opportunity to really create value. This is what fascinated me for 30 years and even longer. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And how do you see, or how do you look now at, let's say, especially the automotive industry, but the German economy as a whole, being there for the 30 years, and we will come to that about the future, but now first looking a bit back, was it really the golden ages? How did you see this transition from the 90s, 2000s, automotive companies going global, really conquering the Chinese market together with suppliers, and now the shift in recent years? Do you think something fundamentally in the mindset has changed over the last 30 years, or are we Europeans/Germans like we always were?
I think you're hitting a point here. Like if you look at the development of the economy in Germany, but also in Europe, since the financial crisis, it has basically, if we take out the Corona years and so on, it has basically going upwards all the time. And if you look at automotive, you had very steady, plannable growth, single-digit percentage each year, and it was a one-way road. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Of course, this was very positive. I think it, to some extent, founded a way of thinking in Europe and in Germany. Germany being the third largest economy on this planet, of course, with a big gap to the US and China, but still being the third largest. And this hasn't changed in the last 2 or 3 years, despite all the problems we are having. Mm-hmm. But I think what happened is that in several industries, and particularly most recently in automotive, the rules of the game have changed. With electrification, with automation, like automated cars, self-driving cars and so on. And I think it's only natural that Germany and Europe sticked with the rules, with the business models, which had made them successful in the last, 20 years. Mm. And I think what we are seeing right now is that others who did not have this heritage, like for instance, China in automotive, but also others, have become more successful. And now there's a real urgency for us to change the way we are working, to change our business model. And maybe one example, which I think everybody can understand, is I think Germany and Europe were very good in things you can touch. Yeah, like the Einspritzpumpe or something like that, injection pump. You all know the examples. And now the differentiation of the car, software-defined vehicle and all that slogans, are not that much touchable anymore. They are hidden in software, in code, in algorithms, in data. The German and the European economy is, I'm not saying that they're not able to do so, but they are challenged by this development.
I see. But that's quite interesting, this metaphor of the one-way street. Yeah. It will just continue to grow. You were in those board meetings. You were in those boardrooms. You were consulting at the highest level. Was there any early signs that this one-way street will have an end? In the past?
Yeah, I would say yes and no. Some people know the term of peak car. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the highest number of car sales on this planet, I think it was 2017 or 2018. And there's a discussion about peak car and will we ever reach this amount of sales again? That's a discussion which is ongoing for years and years. And I think everybody who's working in automotive, if I just take automotive as an example, is aware of that. Nevertheless, I think there have been moments, for instance, after quote unquote Corona, where markets were growing faster. And then maybe people thought, maybe it's not, maybe we haven't seen peak car yet. And maybe the hope was in some instances larger than reality. Yeah. And I think that's a little bit why maybe some necessary changes haven't happened earlier, but have to happen now in very limited time with a high urgency.
I see. How is that as a external at these companies? Because basically the party is going on. Everybody is counting that the party will continue, so to say. The growth will continue. And you're there and you don't want to be a bummer, but you want to show perspective that, hey, these are underlying drivers and these drivers are changing and we need to prepare. But maybe that's the best thing to do if you think about the next quarterly call and then next earning report. So how do you approach that on the highest level?
Yeah.
When you have really top management that is very strongly incentivized on earning reports, but they now have to think about 10, 15-year strategies?
Actually, I think the first comment I have to make is you mustn't forget that even as an outsider, as an external consultant, you are part of the system. You are part of the automotive sector. You're reading the same publications. You have studied at the same university. So it's not that you have a certain truth in your hand which others don't have. You're looking at the same information. And the point is, can you draw different conclusions from the same information? Sometimes very hard because there's always two mistakes you can make. Yeah, you can say, okay, growth will not continue. We have to prepare for that. Maybe we have to close plants or whatever. But you can also make a mistake that you are closing plants and the growth continues, and then you're not able to deliver. So let me call it a mistake, first order or second order mistake. And it's very hard to position yourself. And I would say in hindsight, sometimes maybe looking back, it's always easy when you're looking back, I would have been more radical. I wish I would have been more radical. Yeah. Because I think there were signs, if you look at the development of market, that demand is going down, that others are becoming more successful and so on, more competitive. And if you look at the variety of, for instance, automotive companies, some have prepared, some others haven't. If you look, for instance, like the share of cars BMW is producing in the US, that's very impressive. They prepared for, tariffs or whatever. They wanted to have a very balanced production network. Others, which I will not name right now, didn't do that. And I think this shows you that the information was available already years and years ago, but not every player really took the right conclusion out of this information.
Or didn't have the agency to actually act upon it.
Yes.
Yeah. So this radical approach that you said and being absolutely honest with your client and telling him something that maybe he or she doesn't want to hear in that moment, I imagine not always easy.
Yeah.
But from what I understood, obliging to dissent is one of the core principles in McKinsey. On the other way, is there any things after 30 years being there where you said, this is how you influence that organization?
Yes, I hope so. Yeah. You would have to ask my colleagues, but I think if you would ask my colleagues right now and someone would be sitting there, I could imagine a couple of things they would mention. I think the first one is, as I mentioned, I'm still an engineer after so many years. And I was very fascinated when I studied this systems engineering and cybernetics and all that stuff, systems thinking. So I think I brought that to McKinsey and to some of my projects and maybe even to some of my colleagues. The morph box, I don't know if you know what a morph box is.
No, but please.
It's like it's a morphologischer Kasten, you say in Germany, but in English it's a morph box. It's basically a concept you can apply if you want to solve a problem. You basically dissect the problem in sub-problems, and for each sub-problem, you list the possible solutions. Yeah. So for each sub-problem, maybe you have 3 or 4 or 5 possible paths to take, and then you get a box, which is basically the opportunity of all the things you can do, and then you can select. That's a way, of approaching a problem where I have applied very many times. And at McKinsey, there's jokes about the Cornet morph box around. And the other thing is, I learned like adherence to highest standard, 100% cube quality when I was a very, very young consultant. I had senior people working with me, which were just, let me call it, brutal about quality. Yeah. So if there was a number on page 1, which was 0.36, and on 70, it was 30.35. So just a minor difference, people would say this is not acceptable. So I learned it the hard way, and I'm trying to really hand over this adherence to highest quality standards to all the younger colleagues I worked with. Maybe that's another one. And I think the last one is just knowing your stuff, doing your homework, being prepared, showing up early. So some of these old-fashioned things, which sometimes in a, let me call it, new economy, get a little bit lost. I like them, and I think we should stick to them. That's also all things I try to keep at McKinsey. Yeah.
Cool. And now, after 30 years out of McKinsey, and you started with some colleagues, you published a paper,
Yes.
A Pivot for Germany.
Yes.
Before we go into that, why? From your point of view, because you had your career, you achieved great things. What motivates you to push this agenda and still be active and talking on such a high level?
Yes. Why we published this paper was also because it was the 60th anniversary of McKinsey in Germany. And that was actually, for me, it was not easy to leave because I liked working at McKinsey. So I took this symbolic mark of myself being 30 years with McKinsey, McKinsey being in Germany for 60 years, as a milestone to say, okay, there will not be a better time to leave McKinsey, so I leave now. Yeah. So I forced myself a little bit. So we published this study because being in Germany for 60 years, we wanted to some extent give something back, but also write down our experiences. And I basically godfathers, let me put it that way, this study together with one other colleague who left exactly at the same time, as well after 30 years. And we said, when we are leaving, we want to also write down our experiences. Myself from 30 years in automotive, he from 30 years working with financial institutions. So it was a little bit like writing our experiences on paper, but also giving something to Germany and talking about our confessions, which made us basically invest a lot of time into this study.
Yeah, and we will go into the study right now, but before we do, for the audience, how is the study accessible? Can we just Google for it, or?
Yeah, you can Google it. So A Pivot for Germany, you find it in the internet, or in German, it's Wachstumsinitiative Deutschland. So you find it. It has been published end of last year. So it's available, and you can also go to McKinsey.com. You will find it as well.
I see. I see. Great. I've read it, and it's really interesting, good stuff in there. But before we go into the nitty-gritties of it, now talk about the past a bit. And not only in our discussion, but in general public discourse, there is some type of, the golden ages are over. We have a real problem. We have to change something. And a lot of people think about it and say, do we actually? Is this not just a bump? Okay, energy prices went up and they will go down again. Or right now, the geopolitical situation is difficult, but it will change again. Do we really need to go fundamentally pivot? Is this really necessary, or is this just a seasonal thing that will just pass over and we will just continue like we did in the last 30 years? So what's your point to the people who are still skeptical that this is maybe just temporary?
Yeah. And that's a fair question. Or it's a good question to ask. You have seen while reading the study that it's very much about growth and not about growth for companies or growth for shareholders getting even more or for companies being more profitable. It's for growth for society because we have the fundamental belief that without continuous growth, it will be difficult for society to thrive. Yeah. And if you look at the growth of Germany, not only against China or India or the US, but also among European peers, then Germany is pretty much the only economy which has not been growing in the recent years. And currently, as you all know, Germany is kind of flat. The countries around us are growing by 1%, 1 point something percent. So on average, I would say most of them a percentage point higher. So you can see that this is not something which is about the environmental system or the economy of the world. It's something which is about Germany. Yeah, because others are having the same environmental situation, the same economy around them, the same tariffs, the same war in the Ukraine, but they're still growing and we aren't. So there has to be something wrong in the way we are doing things currently. That would be my answer.
I see. And before we go into the details, maybe on a approach level or ideology level, which of these two statements would you rather say is correct? Is it that Germany's approach was great, third largest economy still with 80 million people? That's great, right? When you take it into perspective. Is it something that maybe we lost along the way and we have to re-find it or rediscover it? Or is it, no, we didn't lose anything. What we just did doesn't work anymore? So which of these two, is it more going back to the roots or really changing how we operate?
Yeah, maybe some people would hate the answer, but I think it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah. And if you want my explanation is, I think if you look at productivity, work hours, going for the best, Germany traditionally has been very strong, but we a little bit lost it. Yeah, so our productivity increases have been going down. We are working less than others. And this is basically paralleled by the second element you mentioned, that some major industries, I mentioned that in the very beginning, are changing the rules of the game. Software-defined vehicle, cloudification, database businesses, startups, and all that is new to Germany. And being so successful with the traditional stuff, Germany, to some extent, is late to the party and now has to accelerate. So that's the reason why I think it's a little bit of both reasons you mentioned.
I see. And this approach that really comes through in your study is this shift and lift.
Yeah.
I love that because we use it in the software sector a lot. But maybe for the audience, let's start with shift. What do you mean by shift?
By shift, we mean that if we look at a portfolio of industries like automotive, pharma, biotech, energy, new materials, you name it, shift means that we have to shift our focus. Focus means investments, focus means qualification, focus means where we are employing our people as a society to the more innovative, fast-growing modern industries, which will be successful in the future. And we have to take away all this from industries which are not only being mature, but maybe also declining. That's the fundamental shift, and that's why we called it shift. Yeah.
I see. Can you give some examples for things we should shift towards and things that maybe worked really well as verticals, but things that we maybe should stop investing that much into going forward?
It's always easier to name the things we should develop towards. I think I mentioned some. It's biotech. It's, I would say, the application of AI in certain areas. It's robotics. It's precision medicine. It's pharma. it is new materials, it is space, it is, you name it, modern energy, it's renewable energy, it's sustainable technologies. All these are areas where I think we all agree that the development is very dynamic, but also where Germany has a right to play. Because, for instance, even in AI, in artificial intelligence, Germany in the basic research has a very high share of papers being published. There's lots of university chairs taking care of artificial intelligence. We are not very good in the commercialization of that. This is the major shift we have to make. I think if we look at industries and I'm not certainly saying that we should leave or exit these industries. I'm just saying focusing our investments, focusing our training, focusing our employment on this industry might not be the right thing. And that could be old energy. Yeah, we still have a lot of subsidies for coal in Germany. Yeah, I think to think about how do we deal with steel in Germany. Yeah, maybe it should be very specific applications we still stay in. But I'm not sure whether bread and butter, quote unquote, steel can be done in Germany, given the energy cost and so on and so on. So these industries are examples for maybe areas where we need a different approach.
I have a question on a high level. You're a system thinker and a system designer. Do you have some type of criteria in your head when you're evaluating verticals? So what do you say are like, okay, if this is given, this is something we should look into? And if this is not given, this is something we should think about maybe slowing down.
I think a couple of KPIs you could take a look at would be, first of all, growth. Second, innovation cycles. Yeah, we have industries where how often do you get a new large language model?
Yeah,
every couple of months or something like that.
Yes.
So innovation cycles, R&D ratio. Yeah, how much do you spend on R&D? We have like mature industries where R&D spending is, I don't know, a single-digit percentage number of revenue. We have industries where R&D is like 30% or even more. Yeah, that would be 3 KPIs, which I consider to be very important.
Very interesting. And then especially on the energy sector, because here I see a bit of a conflict, maybe even from an ideology point of view. So renewable energy is very important. Climate change is real. This is not my personal input. This is not something that is made up. On the other hand, if you look for the energy hunger of, for example, AI data centers.
Yes.
Where such a mega AI data center will consume up to 1 megawatt. So this is basically a nuclear plant for one center or for 2. And estimations go from over the next 20 years that we will need 500 of these things. The only solution that experts, from what I understood, say is it's natural gas and nuclear fission. Nuclear fusion will not be ready commercially. And we in Europe, or maybe not in whole of Europe, but especially in Austria and Germany, are very critical towards nuclear energy. So what's your take on that? Because is it the time for a renaissance of nuclear energy or nuclear fission? Or is it something that we just have to bridge until renewable energies or nuclear fusion catch up?
Yeah. I think we are now going to the energy system of the future, which is a tough question. And I don't want to claim that I'm expert about, energy system. I'm not. I believe in climate change, no question about that. And I also believe in, to some extent, man-made climate change. So that's not the question. I think that in Germany, with the Energiewende, to use the German term, we lost a little bit the focus on affordable energy and maybe even also on the amount of energy we will need. And I think we have to make a step back and ask the question, okay, certainly we want the Energiewende, but it has to be affordable. And I think if we do that, we will, and if we are reviewing a couple of decisions, we would take them differently. And I think the way the current discussion, the public discussion, and also the political discussion about energy, climate change, energy cost, and so on, is a bit under-complex in the way it is done. And I give you one example. If you look at the Strompreis, the cost for electricity in Germany, It is, as far as I understand, as far as I can read, it's less than 50% of that is the generation of the electricity. The other 50% is the network,
The grid.
which is, as I understand, 30% or even more. And then it's taxes and other things. Yeah. So yes, you can say that photovoltaic, solar energy, whatever, is very cheap, but you will have a very decentral creation of this energy. So you would need to extend the grid, which costs a lot of money. Yeah. And I have the feeling that we neglected this cost, yeah, when we were talking about the Energiewende. Whereas if you have a rather central gas power plant or a very central nuclear power plant, you can use the existing grid. You do not need to extend the grid so much. So I think what we would have to do is to review, and I think to some extent it's currently happening in Germany with the new government, to review the decisions of the past. I think some of them have been wrong. For me, the exit from nuclear was wrong. Yeah. Nevertheless, the problem is you have an enormous Todzeit, to use the German word, which even some English people use, because if you now want to open up nuclear power plants, it will take, I don't know, 10 years rather than 5 years. Yeah. So that's a dilemma we are in.
Okay, so we talked about the shift. Let's talk about the lift.
Yes.
Yeah? What do you mean by lift?
By lift, we mean that while shifting to these new industry sectors, in all industry sectors, so in the new one and in the old ones, we need to radically increase our productivity. Because that's the problem we are having in Germany, that our labor productivity is not best practice anymore, and it's not increasing fast enough. Yeah? And I think the major problem in Germany, and again here, the discussion is not complex enough for the complexity of the problem we are having. I give you one example. In Germany, the average work hour per year is 1,350 hours per working employee. In the US, it is 1,800. In Italy, it's 1,700, 750.
So 400, 500
350 to 400 hours more. Yeah.
Wow.
Very often in Germany, if you look at a talk show on whatever Friday evening or whatever, people are saying, yes, that's true. We are more productive as Germans. That's not true. It was true in the past, but it's not true anymore.
What do you mean with productive?
Just the value added in euro per hour, whatever you are doing. Yeah. So when we are talking about lift, we are saying we have to make sure that we are becoming more productive, and we also have to revisit the working hours. Yeah, because we are competing with other countries which are being more productive, which are sometimes working longer hours. And also, if you look at the capital productivity some industries are having, we just cannot compete in a global competition with the way we are working. And this will, for instance, take the application of AI in certain industries, which can help to increase productivity. But I think it will also be necessary to be very open and candid about productivity. That currently, unfortunately, very unfortunate, and I hate that, we are losing a lot of jobs almost in the entire automotive industry. Many at suppliers, many at some OEMs and so on. And this is not something which happened from yesterday to today.
Yeah.
It's something which happened over a period of at least 10 years. And I think we were not open enough to review productivity, to ask the question, are we productive enough in those companies? Or do we have to take measures to increase productivity? So what's happening right now is not only solving the problem of the last year, is solving the problem of the last 10 years or even longer. And of course, that's very painful.
Maybe at this point, an outcry from a European entrepreneur in one of these innovation verticals. Because I'm listening and what I'm thinking to myself, and this is very conflicted myself about this. So we have way more regulation when it comes to CO2 emissions. way more than China and the US. We have way employee-friendly labor laws. We have things now like AI Act. We have higher energy costs. We have higher labor burden. And sometimes, this is now a very personal feeling, and I like all those things. I think these are things that make, to some extent, why Europe is great and why it's a great place to live. But then I'm saying to myself, okay, and now I compete with companies who do not have these restrictions in a game that is so fast. Sometimes it's very hard. I don't know if you have an answer to that.
No.
But it's the feeling like fighting the bigger guy who is actually ahead with one hand tied. So I just have to try double as hard? Is that the point?
No, you're hitting a point here. Absolutely. I share your opinion. It's ridiculous what's currently happening. And most recently, I learned about the Entwaldungsverordnung, which is the Deforestation Act. Yeah, we all know about CSRD. I think you haven't mentioned CSRD. Let me use a picture maybe everybody knows from one of the Harry Potter movies where there is this new hat at Hogwarts, and every day she's nailing a new Verordnung for Hogwarts to the wall. I don't know if you remember this
Yes,
scene.
I remember that.
If you're going to Brussels, it sometimes seems like that. And you don't know whether you should cry or you should laugh if you're looking at that. And I think this has to stop. This has to stop. And my fear is the current structure we are having in Brussels, European Commission, the European Parliament, the entire body which we are having there, is basically blocking any change. And why am I saying so? Because if you are an employee in some of the commissions or whatever, your target function is to produce regulation. If you want to be productive as an employee, the measure which is being counted is regulations.
So you see the output KPI, the whole goal setting is working the wrong way.
And I think if we don't change this, so if we don't change the target function for these people, like for instance saying, okay, we have a budget of regulations, so if there's a new one, another one has to be killed. If we don't say from now on it has to be at least 50% less, so it's not okay to freeze it, we have to kill 50% of it. And if we don't say maybe we need less people in Brussels, because if you have a large amount of people and their target function is producing regulations, you will get a large number of regulations. So, and that's one of the major frustrations for me today. Everybody is complaining about it, but there's no system thinking, there's no systematic change in the way the European Commission, the European Parliament, and all that is working. So why should there be a change? How should it happen?
So we are already in execution. I'm sorry I took that ahead of time because of my emotional outcry. But keeping the lift, AI.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. Everybody's talking about it. Me, myself, as a mathematician, we learned there's different stages to this. We as a software company, we see it changes not only the productivity, but how work is designed and packaged.
Yeah.
A bit like I always bring this example that you were in a manufacturing factory, and before there was automation and machines, there was a workstation, and that person would do everything in that workstation because that would be the most efficient way. Building a machine that does everything that person does is very hard, but we were smart.
Yeah.
We split it up in not one station, but 8 stations, and we're able to build machines that do each step.
Yeah.
So it's not just about that person is more productive, but again, systematically, how I cut the work so the productivity can go up. And I have the feeling we're very early shoes. I sometimes have the feeling this is 99 and the internet is showing its first wave. So how do you look at that when you, especially you're in contact with companies still are in this transition? How do you see that? How are companies adopting this new LLM models? And where do you see the biggest levers?
Yeah. I think, again, you're hitting a point here. So you described this a little bit, the tailorization of work factories, which to some extent has been a good thing because it increased productivity. So also in many processes, which are not like with machines, but which are administrative processes, we have to some extent a flow of work which is a little bit tailorized. And what certainly is happening in some companies currently is that the application of AI is not done holistically, but is done on each step. So you have the same process steps to some extent, but they are all supported by AI, which gives you an improvement because you can make each step faster or more efficient. But maybe the improvement is significantly below the improvement you would get if you would rethink the entire process, come to the solution that we don't need the process anymore because AI would enable us a totally different approach. I think what's currently happening is that companies are becoming aware of that. I think the first wave was very much along the lines I just explained, the first wave of AI application. Now they are changing that. I think they are in the middle of changing that. I think the improvements which you can make by AI are enormous. Nevertheless, I expect that all the productivity gains companies are targeting, they will be falling short on. Why am I saying so? I think if you look at many of the automation waves, for instance, digital automation in offices, which happened, 30 years ago or even longer. Yeah? What happened is, while you theoretically were more efficient doing something, the standard has increased. So theoretically, how do you say, like Textverarbeitung, like Word and so on, enabled you to do a simple document way faster than with a typing machine. But then you incorporated color, you incorporated pictures, you incorporated specific formatting, and the statistics shows that the productivity gain was pretty low. So my question is, will we really see these radical productivity gains, which on paper all the time, like 50%, 70%, or will it be less? Yeah. So I think that will be the proof of the pudding, which will come in the next years. And then the other thing about AI, which I find funny, and you are way deeper in it, but currently I have the feeling that many things are labeled AI, but they're actually not AI.
No, they're not.
They are whatever, data analytics, but they are still rules-based.
Yeah.
And they are not AI. Most recently, a venture capitalist investor told me, if you want to do a pitch as a startup, in these days, you have at least to use the word AI 4 times in your pitch deck. Otherwise, it doesn't work, even if you're doing something which has nothing to do with AI.
Of course.
So we are a little bit like following a bubble here. No? It will be, so let me say, it will be having an enormous effect on business.
Yeah.
But I think we are still not at the final application, and still we have to see the results on productivity yet. Yeah.
I see. Now, very quickly, because we're running, unfortunately, a bit over time, but I think we could continue this for another hour, actually. Execution. Very complicated, a lot of different things. If now your requirements towards politics, if you would have a magic wand and you would just change one thing, as you said, what would you change? What do you think is the biggest lever on a government institution level in Germany or in Europe that we have to, you already talked about regulations, but is there anything else besides regulations where you say this is something that will be an enabler and which would move the needle in terms of velocity?
It's a tough question, and I tend to answer the question in a somewhat different way than maybe you had in mind.
Sure.
I think what would be a really powerful thing to do is to do something like a best of benchmark of all the solutions we have around us in Europe or even elsewhere. Yeah. Take everything you want. Take pensions. Yeah. Take how do you deal with labor security? So protection against laying off people, health insurance, all the social welfare. And just, again, take my morph box, which I mentioned in the very beginning, and write down all the solutions which you are finding in Europe. Yeah. And you will find a labor security, flex security, it's called, system in Denmark, which I think is a very good idea. You will find some capital-based pension funds. Also, I think it's Sweden, but I'm not sure, Norway. If you go for health insurance, you will find interesting examples in some other countries. Yeah? And it's a question, okay, if it works in the Netherlands, if it works in Switzerland, if it works in Denmark, why can't it work in Germany?
I understand.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm not sure if you're aware of, but you're describing basically the operating system of Singapore.
Yes.
This is exactly what they do.
Yeah.
They just go around the world and look what system works well. I have the feeling sometimes, and especially in my generation, there is some type of inertia setting in, that a lot of times the solutions are clear, but courage is missing in leadership to deal then with the ramification. Because a lot of these decisions, looking at pension, right? We all know, not only Germany, but Austria too, and other countries in Europe, we will hit a wall when it's about pension. And everybody's playing hot potato, I have the feeling. Like every government is saying, oh, not me, you, until it explodes. So what can we do to increase the level of courage in leadership?
Yeah.
Because these are all things that are not easily done.
First of all, I'm not sure whether I agree with your first statement.
Okay.
Yeah. You hear it all the time. We know our facts. It's not about the analysis. We have to do something. It's about the implementation. I would, to some extent, disagree. And that's also what I learned in 30 years working at McKinsey, that very often you come to a situation and they are saying, oh, we don't have a problem with the inside. We understood everything. And then you ask a couple of questions and then you discover, no, we are not at the root cause level yet. We are 3 levels above the root cause level. I think if you would really have a root cause-based discussion about, for instance, pension in Germany, then it would be very hard for some political parties and groups to ignore this. And that's also for us as voters very important. We have to force them to really go to a level of insight, which is the root cause level, and not this blah, 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 3 levels above.
So what you're saying is we think we know, but we are weak, and that actually blocks any actual solution because we just talk about on a very vague level. So we have to just nail it down to the root first.
That's the first thing. The second thing is, and that's a really tough one. I see 2 elements here. I see, first of all, there has to be 2 handsful of people who, to some extent, say, okay, we are coming from different political camps to get our act together now. Otherwise, we really have a problem in Germany. And currently, that might be difficult, but maybe, I don't know, in the next 1 or 2 or 3 years, by chance, we have a group of people who are able to find together. Yeah? Franz Josef Strauss and Helmut Schmidt were political opponents, very fierce opponents. They respected each other. Yeah? I'm lacking that today. Maybe we can create it to some extent. And the second element I'm seeing is that what I like about Switzerland, maybe we need some elements of direct democracy. Yeah? And either a formal direct democracy, like things we are having in Switzerland, which is to some extent limited in Germany by our constitution, as I understand. But it could also be indirect direct democracy. So if the people are expressing their opinion so strongly, politics cannot ignore, then something will happen.
I see.
Yeah? So that would be 2 things I consider important, but it's tough. It's not easy.
Okay. Unfortunately, this is the time we have. What I would love to do is some rapid fire questions, if you're up for it. It's just a short list of questions I brought with me and 1-line answers, please.
I give my very best.
Yeah, I know it's sometimes hard, but let's try. What's the most overrated management idea that you heard of?
Wrong understanding of AI.
One McKinsey principle you will keep forever.
Obligation to dissent.
A project you redesign completely if you could do it again. Don't have to be specific on the company.
Many of the improvement initiatives I have done, I would be more radical.
A book you would give to the 25-year-old version of yourself.
Rather old book, Happiness Advantage by Sean Aker.
Are we gonna get our act together?
Yes, but will be tough.
Thank you, Andreas, for your time.
Thanks a lot for having me.
For Beyond Cost, and check us out on YouTube, Spotify, and other channels. Andreas, thank you a lot again. And yeah, thank you for your time.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.